This is part 5 of the video series where I discuss Rudy from Alpha Investments, a depressing video. And as you all are acutely aware by now, this is the same day as I filmed all those other videos. To get into it, to start out, I want to give you a recap of everything thus far in a depressing video, mainly just the business relationship between Rudy and LSS. But then I want to get into the final topic of this series. Yes, you heard me right. I want to end this series on this episode, or part, if you will. There's no part 6. Part 5 is the end. I've milked this shit as long as humanly possible. I farmed a ton of views from this whole situation, but I hope something can really be taken away. One big takeaway from this whole series is that this situation is very multifaceted. There's a bunch of different topics, there's a bunch of different contexts, there's a bunch of things to analyze. And overall, a lot of people want to boil things down on social media, right? They want to have like a binary, good or bad, wrong or right, and it's like, oh, Rudy's right, Rudy's wrong, LSS right, LSS wrong. It's like there's so many different contextual things to discuss, and a lot of times it's like gray areas out there, and ultimately I don't know what was said behind closed doors, and none of us will ever know, most likely, right? None of us will ever know what was said or done behind closed doors and really what was happening behind the scenes. And a lot of things be taken different ways and different perspectives. But all we can do is just look at certain situations and just analyze them as best as possible and put logic. And honestly, I'm probably wrong on a lot of different things I said in all these videos. I'm just a normal guy in a normal room. I'm not as I'm pretty smooth brain when it comes to things. I just see things and I'm like, hey, this is how I see it. So that's just really a disclaimer there. But yeah, I think that when we see these types of situations, it's really important to realize that there's so much going on, and if you don't break it out into each different topic, and people are like arguing over each other, it's just a clusterfuck. So that's one big takeaway I wanted for each segment of this. There's a lot of different segments. Now, getting into the summary overview, I wanted to talk just about the whole situation. And essentially, Rudy brought up a lot of good points and a lot of different topics, as I've discussed in last 2 sections, right? But overall, the heart of this matter, I think, the reason why this is such a big deal is because it seems like there's a fractured relationship between Rudy and LSS. I mean, in his email, he said that LSS was upset at him and he took the video down because he values the relationships. And I feel for him. I think that Rudy genuinely is a really nice guy, and I've been treated very nice from him in the past. I mean, I remember 2 years ago around this time, he sent a mass email to all his patrons linking a video of mine that I did like this conspiracy theory video of him, and that was so nice. He didn't have to do that. It got me a lot of subscribers and a lot of views, and he was very nice and did that for me. So always remember that out there, and overall I think he's a nice guy, right? This video that he made, a depressing video, overall, does it have points in it that I think are very interesting and are very applicable to the landscape of TCGs? Yes. I think that dance as old as time is a very important concept. And I think that the supply issues out there for Flesh and Blood and Legend Story Studios is also a good topic. And there's a lot of things with also the game piece era, right? Like, it's a good point. There is a lot of that sentiment around where people just want cheap game pieces, but they've never heard of games like, oh, I don't know, Legend of the Five Rings or Netrunner. Like, great, really great games. If you're into the game piece type stuff, you check those games out. They're very good. But ultimately, I think that this video, even though it had a lot of applicable points, the way that it was just brought up along the sides of Magic the Gathering and MetaZoo, and just how the management overall is not doing what they're supposed to. I think there's just too many blanket statements that just really skewed the average viewer's mindset to think, hey, Flesh and Blood isn't doing very well. And I think it really distorted reality in a way that made it feel like Flesh and Blood was in a bad situation, when I don't think that that's really what he wanted to convey. Like, there's a couple different points in the video where Rudy said, hey, Flesh and Blood has like the best artwork, and Flesh and Blood is a really good game. It's nowhere close to the MetaZoo situation, but those things were said so subtly like this. They weren't said like this. So the way that they were said, in the average viewer taking that information on, I think that they came to conclusions that weren't really what is really based in reality, or wasn't really fair in a way, if I can say it. It just, straightforward. So I think that that's kind of the basis of the situation, and I think that overall, it's sad. I think that Rudy really does care about his relationship with LSS, and this is a big hurt, and overall with Legend Story Studios. I don't know what was said with the whole map situation, but I can see where they're coming from, where if they have, hey, stores that are complaining to them about Rudy selling under map. To be honest, man, though, I don't think Rudy and his, selling boxes below map, I really don't think that impacted the market. When he said he wasn't selling too many boxes on his platform, I probably agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of other different avenues that people have to, buying booster boxes out there for Flesh and Blood. So I don't think it was as big of issue as you think, but I do understand the standpoint of, hey, Flesh and Blood is here for the LGS in person play, and Rudy's model doesn't really foster that, right? And even though it doesn't foster that, I think LSS still needs to think, hey, Rudy was your friend way early on, man, in 2019, 2020, and maybe a little bit earlier than 2019. Like, he was there promoting the game, and he was there when a lot of stores out there in the landscape said, no, I'm not taking on a new TZG. I've been burned in the past. Rudy was there. So I think that that's also important to know. And, that's just my whole dissection of the whole events. But overall, personally, I really hope Rudy and James and LSS can just figure out a way to, build back up that relationship going forward. And even if Rudy's not selling booster boxes, maybe he can be doing something else. Maybe there's some distro type activity, or some other type of activity that his business can do, and where they can, prosper and create a new business partnership. I really hope they're able to heal that stuff, because I heard a story where, I think Rudy was telling it, where him and James White were on the top floor in New Jersey of a hotel, and he saw all these people on the ground floor playing Flesh and Blood, and Rudy turned to James and said, you did this, or something along that lines, basically stating like, hey, because of you, all these people are here to play this great game. And it sounded like a magical moment, right? It sounded like this thing, and it seemed like there was a good friendship there. So I hope that persists in the future. I hope that this one little video gets lost to time, and things are, back to normal in some way, shape, or form. So that's my true hope for this whole situation. It's tough, because as people in the community of Flesh and Blood, usually we see these things happen, and then there's deafening silence where we don't hear anything from LSS or the other party, and it's like, well, what happened? And a lot of times we don't know, and we just have to take it. And there's just a little scar on the game for, or the history, that just doesn't feel like there's a resolution to. So hopefully we get that whole resolution. I would like that. I'd like to see that. It'd be very nice. So going into the final topic of this video series, I want to talk about something that doesn't really have to do with Rudy from Alpha Investments or Legend Story Studios. Those two entities are not the focus on this topic at all. It does have something to do with what Rudy said, though, in the video, which was, there's a lot of like hatred towards him and a lot of negativity towards him. And I feel like him and his entity is really an investor. And I think that when I heard that, there's a lot of sentiment that I've seen in the Flesh and Blood community that's really anti-investor or anti-investing. And investing in cards and intentionally trying to profit is a bad thing, and you're not supposed to do that. And personally, just me talking to the community, I really hope that negative anti-investing sentiment can just, please, I just hope that can go away. Like, hear me out, man. Are there some actors in the TCG space that are rat bastards and they do like really negative things out there and they impact the game negatively? Yes. Do I think that fraction is like 3%, or maybe honestly it's probably just 1% of the investors? Yeah, I think it's a very small portion of investors out there who impact the game negatively. I think 98% to 99% of investors out there are positively impacting the game, where they put money into the game, which goes to the game stores, players, and collectors. And the more money, the more investors that come into the game, the more money that really funds the operation. And I was talking earlier about the engine, right? In that other part of the video, it fuels the engine and it keeps it, it just more transactions. So I think overall, the whole point of this, right, if I could just summarize, is that it's okay to intentionally invest in Flesh and Blood. And it is a good thing that investors exist in the community, and they are a net positive overall. Do they have some negative side effects? Of course, right? It's just like any drug. You're going to have a lot of good things, but then you have a couple negative side effects. So that's really the whole basis of this topic. Is I just hope that the community can be a little bit more accepting towards people who want to invest. And I think that at this time period, you can dunk on investors so easily, and you're going to get like this group full of pitchfork people behind your posts or content around like, yeah, investors are terrible. But it's like, they really do help the game overall, and I think that they should be welcomed. And back in the day, man, when I was first into Flesh and Blood, I was on the Reddit group a lot, right? Just a little side story. And any new person came into the game, I said, "Welcome to the party, man. Glad you're here. The game's great. I hope you really enjoy it and everything like that. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you're about, why you're buying the cards. You're buying the cards, and you're a fellow, friend, right? You're part of the community. Welcome to the community." And I want that vibe to persist, even with the investors, even with other different groups out there. No matter who you are, where you're from, you're invited to, you're accepted into the community. And I always want that vibe, right? I think especially in the first year of this game, we had the best vibe of that, of just you were accepted no matter what, right? In other TCGs and other communities I've heard of in the past, like there's a lot of different frictions between different groups and everything like that. And I've seen that kind of fester, and as a game grows, that's gonna fester, and you're gonna have different schisms and people just arguing for stupid reasons. But ultimately, I hope we can just acknowledge that everyone has like a part to play in the ecosystem, and also people aren't just one-sided, one-dimensional individuals like myself. Like I'm a content creator. I collect the game, I play the game, and I invest in the game. I'm different percentages of that. I don't just make up one different like group. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who are the same. They're like different percentages of each thing. So to boil it down to you're this, you're that, it's just kind of not true. So I want to go into really more of the foundation of the whole investment type thing in Flesh and Blood. Now, Rudy from Alpha Investments, he said a lot of narrative back in the day, like 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, and he had this like whole video series, well, maybe not video series, but more topics around WotC will not acknowledge the secondary market. So they just wouldn't admit that it exists or just acknowledge it whatsoever. And essentially what that means is normally you think of trading card games as assets, right? You buy it and it has value on the secondary market that can be traded and everything. WotC said, no, Like, this is an expense. It's like a movie ticket. You open the box, you get the cards, but the cards don't intrinsically have any value. And the community of Magic just like railed on us. It's like, what's going on here? Like, why don't the cards obviously have value? They're being sold on many different marketplaces out there. But I think maybe due to legal issues or whatnot, they just didn't want to commit to that verbiage, and it just acknowledged that there is a market, a secondary market on the back end versus the primary market where the cards are subsequently bought and sold, right? And what I thought was cool is in 2019, there's a Reprint Philosophy article on the Flesh and Blood website. And I'll put a link in the description below. And LSS, from the very beginning of their game, they literally stated on that the tab, right, the philosophy tab for reprints, is that the trading in TCG is the secondary market, was what their belief is. So bam, like right out the gates of Flesh and Blood releasing, they literally acknowledged the secondary market and was like, yeah, that's the trading part of trading card game, obviously here, right? And they listed the word invest 3 different times in that short a couple paragraph of that reprint philosophy. And they basically said, hey, if you are a single card reseller, which I technically am, and anyone who spends 20 minutes to get a TCG player account is a single seller reseller, and then also players who invest in the cards, they want the cards to have value. They want to maintain that collectability. But then also what went into is saying, hey, the Flesh and Blood TCG is a non-rotating card game, so cards are there till the end of time, and at some points there are necessities to reprint cards depending on if cards went too much in value. I mean, the biggest is you have let's see, Spring Tunic. I guess that's a really big one that's been reprinted a bunch of different times. So cards like that need a reprint based off of the market demand, and they'll reprint as needed. But at the end of the day, they look at the secondary market and monitor it to make sure that everything's in line with what they expect. So the whole point of that is LSS, from the very beginning of the game, the very foundation of the game, admitted, hey, there's a secondary market. And the secondary market, the definition behind that is a market where investors buy and sell assets, right? So they admitted that from the beginning of the game is, hey, there's going to be a secondary market for our game. These cards have value. You can buy and sell and invest them as you wish. And we want your investments to have, some type of value and appreciate. And we want you to, get something out of it, right? You're not going to open an $80 booster box or a $100 booster box and get like $5 worth of cards, right? The cards should have value for what you're, putting your hard-earned money into. So I thought originally, when back in the day, that was so cool, and that really is the foundation of investing in Flesh and Blood. I think of, hey, this is what LSS thinks, and this is really the article behind it. Now, I want to go into more of the ecosystem of just trading card games and how investors, what their purpose is, because I think a lot of people think, okay, investors are just people who are very self-motivated and they all they care about is money and all this stuff, and that's true to some extent. When you're an investor, you are intentionally trying to profit off of a market, but ultimately a lot of it is you believe in the game and you want to pump money into the system, and you want to have cards versus other type of investment utilities, right? So for the ecosystem for investors, I think, and the whole ecosystem for like Flesh and Blood, for example, right? I think of it, the example I like is that the trading card game and the transactions in it are like a campfire, right? You have a burning fire that is the TCG secondary market, and for like Flesh and Blood. And the logs in the fire are the player base. They are the continual fuel for the fire over the long term. Whereas investors are more of a lighter fluid type thing, right? So when a game first starts out, you need a lot of lighter fluid to start the game, to make it collectible and stuff like that, and to just really rev it and increase the transactions and what have you. But after that short after you're released, you need that player base below it in order to just fuel the fire over the long term. You can't just run a campfire off of lighter fluid alone. Eventually it runs out. Like you just can't continually do lighter fluid. It doesn't last that long. So I think with a lot of games out there with the Kickstarter thing and the dance as old as time, what you have is you have all these investors that make up 95% of the fuel early on, and the whole fire, the campfire, is run by lighter fluid. And then what happens is when the investors are out of the game, you have like twigs and sticks and no player base, right? The player base are the logs. You have nothing like that, so the fire quickly dies. I think from this standpoint of Flesh and Blood, the game's been out for 4 years. The fire's burning really bright. There's a lot of logs. The fire's good. But then you have impending weather. You have the economy coming out, and the economy is like rain and wind and stuff like that, which is dampening the fire. And at this point in time, you need lighter fluid. When prices go down, when prices drop, you need those greedy individuals who are trying to invest, put money into the game to not only, which fuels the fire, which gives essential money to game stores, which are able to have more liquidity because of investors, but also investors, they profit longer term. And a lot of times too, investors are very subject to losing money. They can gain money, but a lot of times they lose money. But I think that, overall from my standpoint, it's just nice to buy cards that I want and I think that are underpriced. When you're an investor, you're saying, hey, that card is underpriced. That card, $1, too cheap. That's at least a $10 card. You buy it, wait. If you're right, great. If you're wrong, okay. Better luck next time. So, the whole point of the whole ecosystem is just to showcase like investors do have a purpose in the community. I think it's really for when there's certain opportunities out there where there is an economy issue where people aren't spending as much. You have certain things where maybe there's a bunch of cards that players don't want anymore, like a lot of stuff in Toa. It's not used in the meta. You have a bunch of people out there who are investors and saying, you know what, Oak and Old and maybe a lot of these Earth and Lightning and Ice cards, they might not be used now, but in a year, 2 years down the line, they might be used. So I'm going to pay 50 cents a dollar for a bunch of these, different cards for, each. And then, you give that money to the game stores that don't have the luxury of just waiting it out. And they're very happy for getting the cash early on. And then the investors may or may not, win out over the long run, but at least you're fueling the fire. You're putting that just lighter fluid into the fire when it's dampening down so that it can burn bright and that the whole system is alive. Because when I was talking about the whole entities that are involved with selling booster boxes, they need to make money in order to keep just running their businesses, right? Like if local game stores can't make money, they won't sell the product. Same with distro and just, the consumers as well. If they can't make money off of the product, if the liquidity isn't there, then you'll see the engine stall, you'll see it slowing down. And the engine is really the fire, right? But when you have the investors out there with the lighter fluid, putting it in there, it can just jolt the market and it really helps overall. And that's what I think 97, 98% of investors are. They're really good opportunities to put liquidity back in the market. And then I don't want to over glorify the investor, right? Let me make that very clear. I'm not saying like all the times they are positive, but you do have situations where certain investors will literally buy out 80% or 60 or 50% of the total market, peg a price, and then make players pay those prices in order to play the game. And that's pretty shitty, right? If you legitimately corner a market where you get 50% of the play pieces and then peg the price, then you're more of manipulating the price based off of the lack of supply that you're capturing. But I think that doesn't really happen in Flesh and Blood. I think that it's really a boogie monster example of something that really rarely occurs in Flesh and Blood. I can't think of any situation where someone's really cornered the market on a game piece. I mean, you had surgical extraction back in the day where people suspected things were going on, but at the end of the day, LSS was like, yeah, kind of put it on the wrong like card distribution on the print sheet on Card of Monday. My bad. And then they fixed it, which is good. But honestly, I think that that probably did help a lot of game stores and what have you. Getting a $50 Majestic back in the day. But that's a good example of like there has seemed to be, okay, maybe there's something wrong here, maybe someone's buying these out, but a lot of the times it's player demand or different things. There's not many different times in Flesh and Blood that I could think that you could say, hey, this investor is completely terrible for the game. Even if an investor is spending like an annual salary of $10,000, in a transaction, right? What's wrong with that? They're putting $10,000 out into the market. Maybe a game store gets $5,000 instant cash for game pieces that would have sold in a 3 to 6 month period. You know how massive that is for them, and that's such a win. So the more money I think in the system, the better. And overall, I think we should just be proud of the collections and proud of the investments and money that we put into the game. And overall, this is not investment advice, and I don't want to be, too positive about it. Just listing the downside, there is a lot of bro culture around investing, which is very counterintuitive to the whole hobby, and it's just a weird dynamic where it is a little bit predatory. I'll admit, right? Where people can be like super leveraged and super doing this like in ways that are just not even, they don't even care about the game or anything about the products overall. They just want to make money. And I still, even if they just want to make money, they're still putting money into the game. But I do see how there's negative culture aspects, and that's probably why it's dunked on so much in social media and content creators and what have you because of that. But ultimately, I hope we can get to a point in our community where we just accept like them just as, hey, like even though you might not like them, you can at least see that they are a net positive for the game overall, and they're putting money into game stores' pockets and other players' pockets. And it's kind of interesting. A lot of times I hear that Flesh and Blood is a player's game, which I believe. I believe Legend Story Studios is catering primarily towards competitive play, which I think is going to be really good for them in the long run. But I think it's funny how like that whole logic of, hey, it's a player's game, this isn't really for investors. It's like, well, as an investor, don't I want to invest in the game that's promoting actual gameplay that has like a legitimate game behind it, like a really damn good game, and that has player demand? Like that makes sense as a wise investment opportunity to buy game pieces from a game that people actually want the game pieces to play with, right? It's not like it's like, hey, no, you can't buy these game pieces for the game that's playable. Go over to the Kickstarter pump and dumps and then put your money over there. It's like it's just pretty funny to me in that way. And I mean, honestly, that's kind of why I want to buy game pieces in order to resell and do it as an investment, because there's a lot of demand behind them and future demand when future sets get released. It's a really damn good game, so that's why I'm putting money into it. I probably put maybe $2,000 to $3,000 of my money in 2023 just for investment purposes in Flesh and Blood. I mean, I got a good amount of Rainbow Foil Emperor of Drakai Vaser. I think it's a good card. Think he's pretty cool. I think he's pretty playable. He's pretty underrated. I've been buying a bunch of random Majestics. I probably own like 3,000 Majestics, just random 25 to 20 cent Majestics. I loaded up. A lot of them probably won't see too much profit in the near future, but hey, I'm in this for the long haul, man. I'll wait it out. So, I really just, those types of things where people just buy cards that they think that are undervalued, and they say literally into the market, no, this is too cheap. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to wait it out. And I'd love to hear in the comment section down below anything that you guys have invested in Flesh and Blood and you guys are proud of. Because that's all about it. Like, I want people to be proud of investing in Flesh and Blood in moderation, in a healthy dose. And I want that type of verbiage and perception to be relayed out there. And I think that, in the past, in 2023 especially, you had a lot of downward sentiment around investing in Flesh and Blood and investors. But overall, there's a lot of people trying to make money of Flesh and Blood. I mean, game stores can make money. Why shouldn't the players make money, right? Are players only allowed to make money inadvertently by mistake? Like, oopsie, I accidentally made money when I got out of this deck. Like, that's kind of silly, right? So just to have case in point, I think overall, can you say that there's malicious actors in the TCG industry? Yes. Do they represent a very small subsect of the overall amount of investors in the game? Absolutely. I'd say like 1%, if less, honestly, probably a lot less than 1%. I don't think it happens very much at all in Flesh and Blood. I think people who invest in the game are just putting money in because they think the prices are going to go up, and they're not doing anything that's like cornering the market in any way. And people can have different opinions from this, right? And I fully respect people's opinions, especially around buyouts. But I think the whole notion around buyouts is it's like if I said, hey, people on the road are driving too fast. They need to stop driving too fast because more people die in fatal collisions when people are driving too fast. Is that a factual statement? Sure. But then it begs the question, how much is too fast? And how fast should people drive, right? How fast should people drive? Because I say people driving too fast. I didn't say how fast they should drive. And I think that's the same thing as buyouts. When someone says, we need to stop buyouts, right? Anyone out there who's making content or social media, if they say that, you're going to get this army of pitchfork warriors saying, yeah, no buyouts. But like, no one wants to fucking define a buyout and explain how much that is. Like, is that 20 copies of a card? Is it 40 copies of a card? Is it 180 copies of the card? Is it $2,000? Is it $3,000? Like, what constitutes a buyout? And there's no universal brotherhood of accepted truth around what constitutes a buyout. In that case, I think it's just downward negativity over investing in the game. And when you have that subjective notion of who knows what a buyout is, it's just buying too much a card, but I don't know how much it is, then you have all this just clusterfuck of just negativity around where the community's like, well, if fuck it, if this community isn't for people investing in the game, I'll just invest in Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic or any other game. If this community is having pitchforks for people buying the cards and then making that a negative thing, no, I want it to be a positive thing. If you're buying cards because you believe in the game and you're a responsible adult and you want to throw money and your wallet at TCG Player or any LGS and buy cards, that's great. That's a great thing. And overall, investing in the game is good for the game. It is a net positive for the game. And if you want to do it, you should widely be accepted to do it. So that's kind of my rant on this whole subject. But overall, just high level, I just hope the anti-investor sentiment from Flesh and Blood that I've seen fester over the last year or so, I just hope it seeps away and people can just be proud to own cards that have value. That's really my whole rant on this subject. But just to wrap it up, I know that this has been an incredibly long video series, and I personally don't like to make videos around drama and situations like this. Something that you've probably noticed is that all of these video titles are farming views, and the reason why I labeled it like that is I feel incredibly dirty making all these different points. But when I heard this information and heard about this drama situation and listened to a bunch of other content creators and people who have views, I didn't think that what I was thinking was represented out there in the wild, right? And I saw all these other things that I felt like weren't really based on reality. They didn't have any context. So I thought I could really add something to that, right? And just put something out there to really show you guys, hey, like this is multifaceted, and here's just opinions that you don't have anywhere else. I tried to definitely discuss this in as much detail as possible. And I do also want to say again, like again, I don't know what was said behind closed doors. I don't want to make it determine right or wrong, good or bad, whatever have you. I hope mom and dad kiss and make up, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to just put stuff out there that really broke it down as good as possible, and I hope I did that for you. And even though I make a dig at myself and say I'm farming views, this channel at this point in time has like 1,400 watch hours out of 3,000 and is not currently monetized. So it's not, I'm not making money off of this whole drama. I'm not sponsored as well. So there's it's not like I'm profiteering off of this whole thing. I just honestly wanted to put something out there that really encapsulated the whole situation as best as I saw it. And hopefully I didn't make any misstatements here or there. And overall, I'm a normal guy in a normal room. And I'm just giving you my opinion, and hope you've enjoyed watching. And I probably won't do one of these for a bit. And hopefully if I do it again, it's not based off of a drama type thing. But I really appreciate the positive feedback and all the comments you've made, or everyone's made over the last couple of days. It's been really cool. So just ending a remark, I just hope we hear more. Hope it all works out, and I hope that we don't just get deafening silence. I don't want it to be just hear nothing after this. Be nice if there's some type of resolution to the whole thing. Thanks for watching.